I guess we'll start by saying welcome. Welcome to the How to Be podcast, Lan. You are the host of Morning Rae, which is also another podcast. But yeah, firstly, welcome and hello, I guess.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and I'm excited to chat with you.
I know, I'm excited to have you on. We were having a little bit of a chat just now, but basically, I've been listening to Morning Rae for the past couple of years, and I think we're quite similar and quite aligned in our messaging. And so I'm quite interested to have this conversation with you because a lot of topics that you put out there and into the world and you talk about in long form on your podcast are just how to get closer to yourself, I guess, and how to love yourself and like yourself a little bit more to be, without sounding cliche, like the best version of you. And so it'll be really interesting to get your perspective on this and for my audience to hear another perspective for the same topics that I talk about. And so I guess we'll start by giving you a little bit of an introduction and who you are and what you do and how you kind of built Morning Rae and why.
Yeah, so I'm Allana or Lan. I'm based in Toronto, Canada. So I'm a Canadian girly. I feel like a lot of the podcasters in this space, which I'm sure you can relate to, Chloe, are based in the States in America. So we're the unique outliers over here, but I'm a Toronto girl raised in the suburbs and then moved downtown around almost 3 years ago now, which is pretty insane because it feels like just yesterday. I studied marketing at Ryerson University, which is now Toronto Metropolitan University. I was there for 4 years, majored in marketing, minored in retail management. Started my career very much in the social media space. I worked for a few different marketing agencies. One was more CPG heavy in terms of the brands that we worked with as our clients. And then this last agency I worked for was a bit more lifestyle. So we had luxury rental cabins and clothing brands and food brands. And it was kind of just like all over the place, which was kind of fun and exciting because before at my old agency, it was very much the same thing, just a different brand. But I left that job in October 2022 to work solely for myself. And I've been working full time for myself since then. And what that looks like is me sharing my life on Instagram, TikTok, occasionally YouTube, which to be honest, I slack off with quite a bunch. And my followers give me one for it because they really like the vlogs, but it's a lot of work. And then I have my podcast, Morning Rae, which just turned 3 in November, which is pretty crazy. And we actually hit 3 million downloads today. So
Congrats.
kind of wild, but it's just a self-improvement podcast. I started it very spontaneously during the pandemic. I had guested on a few smaller shows and gotten good feedback from my followers who listened. And I just really enjoyed the experience of just speaking instead of showing. I got to talk a little bit and it felt like I was on FaceTime, either just with like my listeners or whoever I was talking to.
Yeah.
And I always have loved to share my wisdom with my friends and my family and those who come into my life. So having a podcast kind of gave me that platform outside of social media.
Yeah. How you said something there about self-love and sharing and kind of building a platform in Morning Rae about self-development. How did that come about? Like, have you always been interested in that? Or is it something that you went through? Or is it something that you grew to be more interested in as you got a little bit older?
I think it's something I kind of came into when I was in university. I realized I was a lot more self-aware than my peers, and I wasn't comfortable with staying stagnant in who I was. I constantly wanted to like push and evolve myself. And I knew I kind of had like this deep inner feeling that I was meant to be more than what I was currently. It's almost like when you see online, like how to become your highest self, like I felt like I had more potential in me. And I feel like a lot of people have external people say that to them, like you have so much potential in like your skill or your sport or your art or maybe your career. But for me, it was something I realized in myself, which now looking back on that is very unique and special and isn't something a lot of people have. So I decided to start to explore and listen to podcasts and read self-improvement books and really question the way that I was thinking and the way I was making decisions and the way I was going about life. I've always been someone that's very like observe it. Like I observe everything. Like I notice every like detail about everything. I knew how to drive to my dance studio before I even had my license because I would just pay so much attention to what my mom or like my friend's mom was doing in carpool to get us to dance. And so I feel like that is what kind of stemmed the interest in self-improvement.
Yeah.
I also got to a point in first year where I had put on a lot of weight and I was just like not happy with my habits and I just felt very uncomfortable in my skin and I wanted to do something to change that. And I also noticed a lot of patterns in my life that were resulting in some negative outcomes, like either how friendships were playing out or the way I spoke to myself or relationships with guys, just like repeating the same sort of story over and over again. And I wanted to find out why. And so like that's where the self-improvement interest came to. But I would say when I was younger, like, no, it wasn't really something I was into. It wasn't something that was really talked about online at all, really. It was very hush hush, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Even till kind of, I was quite late to this self-awareness, self-development journey. And I always kind of, not wish, because I don't kind of live in regret mode, but it's quite a powerful thing to connect to yourself at a young age. And then once you get into that secure mindset and confidence mindset and you're really comfortable with who you are, you can kind of catapult into wherever you want to go and whoever you want to be. And it's a really cool thing. You said there about you noticed quite early on that you maybe had a different approach in terms of mindset to your peers. What sort of things were you noticing and seeing? Because that's really interesting.
I just didn't care about the same things that they cared about anymore. I didn't care about trying to fit in with the popular girls. I didn't care about, I mean, like, obviously, like, you still do to a certain point. Like, everyone wants to feel like they belong, but I realized that wasn't really bringing me the joy, the happiness, the love that I was wanting by fighting and searching and trying to like push this narrative of being the popular girl or being liked by like the hot boys or like being the prettiest girl in school. Like my friends were interested in partying and going out and eating greasy food and not working out and staying out late and just like instigating drama. And I wasn't really interested in that. Like I felt like I had matured past that. Still like to like dip my toes in it a little bit because I was like in my early 20s at that point, late teens, but I just like didn't have an interest in that. And I wanted to push myself to move to this next level. And so I started to listen to podcasts of people that were doing that and started to tap into the mindsets they were having. So like the Skinny Confidential, Diet Starts Tomorrow, Girls Gotta Eat, like kind of these very progressive ways of thinking in terms of how you talk to yourself, sexuality, self-love, body image, all of those things.
It is really interesting. And you also, I guess that stems into, you said something about being observant of who you are and your thoughts and your mindset. And I guess that is a transition of when you started to listen to the podcast and you started to learn a bit more about lifestyle and mindset and self-growth and that kind of stuff.
I couldn't find it in like my social circle in my community, so I sought it out from individuals who were posting about it online, whether it be through their podcasts or maybe it was an Instagram page or YouTube channel or a self-improvement book that was at the time, like back in 2018, 2019, 2020, a little taboo or a little outlandish, but now I would say is a bit more of the norm. Like most of my friends now, like we have like these very progressive chats with one another. We have these very self-aware chats and we're not scared to like point out each other's behaviors and kind of like break down like, okay, but like, why are you reacting that way? Why are you constantly going for this type of person? Like, where are you self-sabotaging? I think I didn't have those people back then. So I sought it out from like those online. And then eventually it kind of mirrored itself in my life.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And the next question I was going to ask, so it's interesting that your brain went to the same place, is your friendship groups. And I guess a lot of people listening to this, and a lot of people just in general life, there does become a time where you start to grow apart from friends, or you start to become a little bit different. I think that can either go one way or the other. I think you either recognize and you be a bit ballsy and you start to go down a different path and start to make relationships and friends with other people that feel more aligned to you, or you start to kind of keep up with the Joneses and do stuff that's not really in your character anymore, or things that go against what you feel you should be doing. And then you spend time being someone that you're actually not. And so how do you deal with that in that situation when you start to feel like you're becoming a bit different to the friendship group that you've got?
Honestly, it's really tough because it can feel really lonely, not only from the fact that you feel like you can't fully relate to these people anymore and you can't be your authentic self with them, but as you start to kind of like pull away from these people, because you don't have to necessarily say to these people, like, I don't want to be your friend anymore. You can just slowly like stop reaching out for plans, or maybe say no to some plans. It can kind of get lonely in that transitionary period, but high risk, high reward. Like if you stay in a place of what you deem as comfortable, you're never going to see growth. Yeah. And sometimes it takes, or actually all the time, it takes stepping into that new area of discomfort in order to find comfort again. You really have to challenge yourself in order to change things. Like nothing changes if nothing changes, right? So yeah, it was something that happened very slowly but surely. There are still friends that are in my friendship circle that I've had since childhood, or I've had since high school or university. And there's been moments where we've grown apart and we've grown back together. But in order to make space for people who are in alignment with the new type of person I want to be and the new type of person I am and who my authentic self is, you do have to shed some of the people that are standing in the way of that. And that doesn't mean you have to have any bad blood with them. You can still be civil with them when you run into them at the bar or on the street or in the workout class, but you don't have to be besties with them anymore.
Yeah. And I think that's okay, isn't it? I think a lot of people think that when you grow apart or whatever, that's it. You have to draw a line under it. And that's not it at all. Like you said, friendships can grow and they can come back, because our lives chop and change all the time. And I think you chop and change as people, don't you? We all go down different directions, and we're multiple different versions of ourselves at any one time.
Mm-hmm. I think like life really does ebb and flow. Like some people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Literally, Justin Bieber says this in his song, but like, like things are like meant to change. Like you're not meant to stay stagnant. And if you are, I think you should take a moment to reflect, like, why are you so stagnant? Like, why are you so comfortable with being comfortable? Like, why are you resisting in your life? Because you are worthy of so much more than you are giving yourself credit for and allowing for in your life. Like if you want this big, lavish life, whatever that looks like to you, you're going to have to change something in order to go after it. Like it's not going to be easy. Like the good things in life don't come easily. They may occasionally, but for the most part, you have to work for them and you have to change things and you have to do that inner work in order to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's a lot about discipline and motivation, which I wanted to speak to you about as well, in terms of being motivated to be you. There's not actually a lot of people I've come across that speak about it so kind of black and white. And I think you make a really good point of putting out there advice and conversation and passion about how to just be yourself. And so I guess, where did that come from? Because, yeah, I think motivation is the word, and I know it's a word that you use as well, but where did that come from? Like, when did that start?
I think I was just like tired of trying to be someone I wasn't. Like, it's exhausting. It's essentially you are acting 24/7.
What sort of things were you doing at that point?
I think I was just like forcing myself to be in social situations like I didn't want to be in, like hanging out with people that I know I would leave feeling super drained just because they had the popularity status symbol, or people like the boys thought they were cool. So like by association, if I hung out with them, like those same boys would think I was cool too. Or because like I just wanted to fit in, like I was a teenager, like it's a normal human thing. But I realized that like my happiness and like my ability to feel fulfilled leaving an interaction with someone is worth so much more than trying to fit into this box. Like I felt like a square trying to fit into a circle hole and it wasn't working. And I used to admire, there is a girl in my high school who she just wore whatever she want. She wore super cool pieces, like she was super fashionable and out there. She wasn't basic, like she didn't wear the same pieces that everyone else was wearing from the same stores. Like she was just so authentically herself, and I admired her for it. And no one batted an eye. No one was like, oh, what is she wearing? Like, oh, what is this girl doing? People were like, oh, that's just so her. Like, that's so cool. She's sick. And the moment I realized that I could have that myself by just like owning who I am and who I want to be and wearing whatever I want and doing whatever I want, it's when I got my power back. And Sarah's Day says this a lot. She's an Australian YouTuber, if you don't know her, but she always says, act confident and no one will question you. And it is so true. Like truly just like fake it till you make it. Like, I don't know. I was at the gym today. I was using a machine like I don't typically use. The last time I used it for the first time was with like my friend Jen, who's a trainer and is training me. And today I used it by myself for the first time. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just pretended I knew what I was doing. Like no one's going to like look over and be like, oh, what the heck is that girl doing? You know? So just like own you, like putting the energy into owning yourself is so much more rewarding than trying to fit in and be someone else.
Yeah. It's so interesting, the whole like looking over your shoulder thing and worrying about what other people are saying or thinking about you, because we all know the more, like I can't tell you the amount of times I've said it on the podcast or we've had conversations about it. We all know that we all live in our own heads and we're all thinking about ourselves all the time. So it's crazy the amount of time that we waste worrying about what other people are thinking about us, because bottom line, nobody really gives that much of a shit, like what we're wearing or what we're doing or how we're talking or who we're hanging out with. Like no one's watching us that closely.
No. And if they are, they're jealous of you or they're projecting their insecurities on you. Like the only reason why someone gets jealous or envious of you is because you're doing something that they're insecure about or they're too big of a coward to do themselves.
Yeah.
Like think about it. You notice, like say you're insecure about your thighs. You'll notice if a girl has nice legs.
Yeah.
Like that's like probably the first thing that you realize as a girl who is insecure about her thighs sometimes. Like that's the first thing I notice.
Yeah.
So like just remember that if someone is ever bullying you or poking fun at you for something, it's a reflection of them and not you. And you should take it as a compliment, even if it sucks. I know it's easier said than done, but really it is a reflection of how they feel about themselves and what they're doing in their lives and not about you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I agree. And I do think if we switch that energy into like figuring ourselves out or working on our insecurities, like we'd all be so much better off. Yeah. Let's talk about Morning Rae and how that came about and kind of how it came about and what were your ambitions for it, because I find it, I said it 100 times before we started, but I find it really refreshing how your approach to these conversations is really authentic and you're quite vulnerable with it and you're not scared to share and, you know, be honest and open. And I find that really relatable and refreshing. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about Morning Rae and how it came about and where you're going with it.
I think for me, like I always like, despite having a big sister, I have a big age gap with her. It's 8 years, but I always wanted someone to be able to give me the advice that I'm giving on the podcast. Like I wanted someone to just give me like the unfiltered, no bullshit, like reasons and like explanations as to why things are they are or like how to change things. Like I just wanted no frills, like just what it is. And I couldn't find that really in any creator online, either they were much older than me and had a different life experience and different viewpoints, which I do think is beneficial, but I couldn't really find someone that was giving the advice from the perspective that I wanted. Now I would say like Peyton Sarden, who is the host of Note to Self, I would argue is like the older version of me. I think we have similar perspectives, a little bit of a different walk of life, but I would agree that like we have similar perspectives and outlooks on life, which is refreshing for me to listen to.
Don't you think that's interesting? Because I feel like a lot of people are creators and they're content creators or they're influencers or they're putting things online or they're putting perspectives out there. A lot of it is about self-love, and yet you couldn't find something that you still felt related to. So that to me speaks volumes about the content that is being put out and how authentic stuff is, because you can kind of see through BS, right, when you're looking online or whatever.
I just feel like a lot of this stuff at the time when I started Morning Rae, which is 3 years ago. So like a lot has changed in the creator space since then, especially with like TikTok continuing to grow the way it is and the trends in content and the type of creators we're seeing. But everyone was so like, besides like Emma Chamberlain, everyone was so curated and it was very cinematic and edited. Like you still had very much the typical Instagram blogger with the curated feeds and everything. No one was just like you're on FaceTime with a friend. There was no that. The podcasts were still very like overly produced. Most of the time it was two hosts. If it was a singular host, it was someone like Jay Shetty or like Mel Robbins-esque, like a lot older motivational speaker, not just your average 20-something-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And even if there was that, there was also a lot of the things that I was seeing was these were creators that never really went to university. They never had a traditional career. And they were kind of out of the loop. They didn't have normal life experiences that I had. They didn't really have the normal life problems that I was going through. And I found it hard to totally relate with them in a whole capacity. And I'm sure there's people that can't relate with me 100%, but that's normal. But I couldn't find someone that was truly like me. And so I felt that there was a hole in the market, like most brands start. That's how they start. And that's like where Morning Rae came from. I just wanted it to feel like you were on FaceTime with me, like we were having debates and conversations as friends, just very unfiltered, chill, calming, and comforting, but also like pushing you to question things about your life and the decisions you're making.
Yeah. And are they conversations you said about like having deeper conversations with your friends? Are they, I guess some of the topics stem from that and the conversations that you have with your girls anyway?
Yeah. A lot of the times, like, if I'm, like, stuck for ideas, like, I'll message my friend Shayna or I'll message my friend Jess being like, what can I talk about on the pod this week? Like, because I feel like a lot of the times I am better at sharing knowledge and information and advice when prompted by a question, which actually is, like, if you ever done your human design, mine literally says that I'm a generator and that's, like, how I best create. Which I think is so funny. But like literally just either from asking them or from conversations that we organically had or things I've spoken about in therapy with my therapist or just like self-discussions I've had with myself.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I think that comes across in the content that you put out. It is like a conversation with friends, and it actually, what response have you had in terms of putting that out? Because I know I get a lot of questions from friends who listen or DMs or whatever about I always use the example of journaling. Like people get so scared to like look within or have honest conversations or conversations with their friends. Do you get anything like that from your audience, or what are things that people ask you after listening to your podcast?
I want to say like my most asked question is like how I get up at 6 a.m. Like I'm like, I don't like, which I think like I don't think people realize it's like so hard for me to explain how I do it because I've always just been this way. So in order for me to explain and give advice on how to wake up earlier and how to be consistent with your workout routine and all these like health habits and rituals and routines and whatnot that I do, I really have to like, it's empathy. Like I have to pick myself up and put myself in someone else's shoes and look at it from the outside in or from a different perspective, because I've always been like this. If you were to go and sit down with my mother, she would tell you like I was always up super early. Like I've always been this like super hyper productive person. I've always been like hyper organized, always rearranging my room, always being like the mother of the group at dance. Like I was the one that my studio owner would always be like, Allana's the role model or whatever. Even though I wasn't like the strongest dancer, I just had a good work ethic. Like that's just always how I've been. But probably like the most asked questions are how to be consistent with any of the habits I share. So like journaling, waking up early, working out, eating well, how to even like start journaling or finding a therapist, going into therapy, how to get over like that hurdle of like resistance when it comes to starting therapy or like knowing when is the right time for you. A lot of questions about dating, which I think is so funny because I've never had a boyfriend, but I will say I've never had a boyfriend. I've never had a long-term relationship, but I am confident in the fact that I give great dating advice when it comes to like casually dating and like going on dates with people and like securing dates and the first date rules and stuff like that, because I have sat down on probably like it's probably like close to like 70 dates like in the past like 3 or 4 years. Like I've really put myself out there. So.
We need to do another episode purely on dating. I think dating is a weird one that it is a podcast episode for another day because it's so intricate and complicated and people are overwhelmed by it and don't know how to navigate the whole dating world right now. But in terms of routines and rituals, I don't know how you feel about it, but I think, and I'm speaking from experience, I made self-love and self-development so unbelievably hard that it was impossible for me to keep up to. Everything was in a routine. I would write journal on my to-do list. I would put meditate on my to-do list. I would not do anything on a Saturday because I had to dedicate it to self-care. I took it to the limit. It was ridiculous. And I just started hating everything. And then you actually said something in a podcast episode recently that was slow down to speed up. And I was like, oh my God, yes, that's exactly it. And again, from my experience, I've really stopped and I've never chilled out I'm not someone who lays in front of the TV and watches movies and stuff. And now I've implemented that into my life. I actually get way more done and I feel way more connected to myself.
Isn't it crazy?
More content. And I feel like I do less. And so when people are asking you about routines or implementing self-development into your life, how do you actually do it? And I don't mean the fluff online about journaling and meditating and moving and, the pressurized stuff. I mean, in real terms, in your day-to-day, what does that look like and what has worked for you?
I think it really is like applying and like putting slow down to speed up into play. Like less is more. Think of like minimalism versus like maximalism. Like maximalism is like when you're doing your meditation, you're working out, you're doing like all these things. Your to-do list is like 20 million things. Minimalism, you are at your bare minimum. You're doing your non-negotiables, which could merely be making your bed, getting dressed, and I don't know, not being on your phone for the first 30 minutes of your morning. Yeah. Figure out what is one thing. Start with one thing. What is one thing you can do consistently, confidently, even if it is a little bit challenging for you at the beginning? What is one thing you can consistently do every single day for you that fills your cup up? I don't care about whatever wellness girl is doing on Instagram. I don't care what she's doing on TikTok. I don't care what he's doing, what they're doing. What fills up your cup? What makes you feel good? What puts you in a good headspace? And what enables you to be able to have the energy, the confidence, and the willpower to take on whatever the hell your day throws at you? Mm-hmm. Think about that. Is it making your bed? Is it washing your face and doing your morning skincare? Is it making sure you have a nourishing breakfast? Is it making sure you get even 10 minutes of movement in the morning? Mm-hmm. Is it opening your blinds? Really like baby yourself, simplify it. I think like what you said, Chloe, like things get lost in translation. We get so overwhelmed with doing everything and anything that we forget why we're doing it.
Yeah.
So really think about like what is going to put you in the right headspace. The reason why we have a morning routine is to lay the foundation for our day.
Yeah.
But if the things that we're doing, the meditation, the journaling, the working out, etc., isn't laying a good foundation for us, why the hell are you doing it?
Yeah.
Like there's literally no point. It's going in and it's going out 1 year.
Does a routine work for you? Does a morning routine work for you? And what does that look like?
I think for me, like it always has. I'm someone that thrives on consistency. I rely on stability. I've always been someone who is a bit more anxious prone, and that like grounds me. My morning routine, what it looks like. I wake up at around like 6:30. I have a sunrise alarm clock. I really like the one from Hatch, but that's what wakes me up. I found like my alarm clock on my phone was just like putting me into a state of shock every morning. It's literally so traumatizing.
Anxiety.
Like literally if I hear the Apple alarm, like the standard Apple alarm in like a YouTube video or something, like I literally have PTSD. Like it's not okay. And I know I'm not alone in that, but yeah. I love my sunrise alarm clock. There's lots of affordable options for literally like $40 Canadian on Amazon, but I wake up at around 6:30. I, to be honest, scroll on my phone for a little bit, like we're being honest over here. I get out of my bed. I make my bed. I'll go get ready. So brush my teeth, wash my face, maybe put on a little bit of makeup, depending like what my day is. And then I'll come and make my coffee. I take my vitamins and probiotic when I make my coffee. That's my little habit stack. And then I'll usually, to be honest, answer some emails. I'm an assistant for a makeup artist. So I'll do some emails and then I'll have my coffee. Sometimes I'll read a book, have breakfast, go work out, and then come back, shower, and start my day. Yeah. But that's it. Sometimes in the summer, I'll like go outside and sit at the park and read and like go on a little walk. But in the winter, I'm staying indoors. So
honestly, it's too cold. But I think I asked you about your routine because I was interested to hear what it was, and I knew it wouldn't be like, I get up and I stretch and then I like go to Pilates and then I come back and I go for a run and I have a cold shower, and like this is what we see online, but actually in reality, you know, you probably are a definition of someone who is all about self-growth and who is talking about trending topics and who is diving right into self-development and self-love. But actually what that looks like on paper versus in reality are two very different things. And I think it is made to seem like it's so complicated. And like we were talking and you said something really interesting there before you were telling us about your morning routine, about seeing what people are doing online and tailoring something that works for you, because we are all so unique and so individual. And, you know, I think you could be so similar to someone yet so different in so many ways, and what makes them tick and tick their boxes is completely different to you. It's just so fascinating, isn't it? You would never pull someone's life and put it in replace of yours, and it's just a weird one to navigate when it comes to the self-love space.
Yeah. And like also it takes trial and error to figure out what works for you, and what may work for you in this season of your life may not work for you in the future. And my routine has changed a million times, to be honest. It changes typically like from season to season as the weather changes, because the weather is so like true 4 seasons here in Toronto. So my life changes. And even sometimes I have more of a work focus. Sometimes I'm moving slower and focusing more on self-care. Like life changes. As I said, it ebbs and flows. And you need to let go of all expectations as to what you think your life should be and what you're expecting it to be, and kind of just take it day by day. And I'm not saying don't have goals, don't have aspirations, but don't get so mad at yourself if it's not exactly perfectly like how your morning routine should be, or like where you think you should be at this point. Like there is no specific timeline to life. There is no rush to complete things. I think people get really caught up, especially here in like Canada and the States. I don't know what it's like in the UK and in Europe, etc. But like you're told like after you finish high school, you have to go straight into university and you're supposed to complete that in 4 years. And then after the 4 years, if you're not going to do like graduate studies, like your master's or your PhD or like anything of that sort, you have to get a big girl job, and you have to make sure it's a really good job and you want a good salary. And the goal is to get 6 figures of your salary and blah, blah, blah. Like you can take 5 years to do university. You can take a gap year between high school and university, and you can travel, you can work, you can, I don't know, do like a mission or something like that. You can choose to take a break after university and travel again. Like there is no specific way to do life. You need to figure out what works for you.
I think that I talk so much about pressure on here, but it's all down to pressure, isn't it? And when you remove that pressure and you work on your own timeline, it's like we said, it's amazing what you can actually get done.
Mm-hmm. I like struggled with this so much. I actually transferred schools, which I feel like you probably know listening to the podcast, but I transferred universities halfway through my degree. Yeah. And in my community, like previously, like that's what people would perceive as a failure, or like switching to the school that I switched to was always seen as like the backup school, as the less than school, when really that school was a better fit for me. And I was so much happier at that school than the school that was supposed to be like the school to be at. Like there's like 3 schools that everyone goes to in like the greater Toronto area. And once I overcame that, like I was just like so much happier and realized it really wasn't that deep. I didn't have to finish school in 4 years. I didn't have to do it the way everyone else was doing it. I could do it the way that was meant for me and better for me. And that didn't mean I was any less successful or any less capable than the next person.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You seem to be someone who's quite fair with themselves, and like you give yourself chances and you kind of seem to stay in your own lane. Not why is that, but I guess what's the benefit of that? Because again, I find it something that's really quite refreshing that a lot of people just really struggle to do, or struggle to realize that they're not in their own lane, or that they're not in this like direction of their own accord. But what is the benefit of being a bit more gentle or fair with yourself?
I think because I really experience like being really hard on myself. Like I am a perfectionist at heart. Like I am really hard on myself, and I'm my own worst critic. And I just learned it wasn't worth the battle with myself. Like it wasn't worth putting energy into hating myself so much and being so judgmental of my mistakes and my flaws, because like you're human. You're supposed to have flaws. You're supposed to learn from your mistakes. Mistakes are not failures. Giving up is also not a failure. I think also our generation has this like misconception that if you give up on something, you're weak or you're a coward or like you're just giving up so easy. But I think it's almost more courageous and inspiring to give up on something when you realize it's no longer serving you, that it's not doing what it's supposed to do. I really think like we all learn these things through experience. You can talk about it, you can study it, you can read it, you can listen about it. But until you actually put the action into play and start to do these things in your life, you like won't know.
Yeah.
Like you really like gain confidence through action. Mel Robbins says this a lot on her podcast, but you just have to learn through life experience. And I was tired of being so hard on myself. Does that mean I'm never hard on myself? Oh, I'm still hard on myself all the time, but I choose not to listen to it. I don't listen to that voice.
Yeah.
I hear it and I let it go. And I learned that through life experience. I learned that through going to therapy and working through that and finding out why I do that and how to navigate that.
Yeah.
But I just learned it wasn't worth my energy. I'd rather put my energy into the things that really energize me and make me feel good and into saying good things about myself.
Yeah. It's honestly it's so refreshing, because I feel like a lot of people don't see it, and I feel like you see yourself so clearly. And when, I'm talking on a podcast that's trying to encourage people how to be themselves, like, this conversation's great because you know yourself very, very well, and you're very kind to yourself, but you're also still really progressive and still really ambitious. And I think there's a connotation somewhere that people think you can't be driven and ambitious and courageous and confident and soft and kind and gentle and fair and all of those things, but you can.
Yeah, you can. There's a time and place for everything. It's almost like a yin and yang. Like, you need to be able to dance both walks. I don't even know if that's a proper saying, but
It is.
you need to be able to wear both hats. Like, you need to be a woman or a man of many trades. Like, learn how to be the nice person, but also don't let people walk all over you. Like, you're allowed to stand your ground, and no, that doesn't make you a bitch. And as much as, like, society wants to tell you, especially if you're a female, that, like, standing your ground and being stern and being assertive means that you're a bitch, like, you're not. Like, you are allowed to stand your ground and set the rules and the terms as much as the next person, as next as the next man. Like, you can wear multiple hats and wear many different roles, and sometimes you might wear one hat more than the other. But I think it's important to be able to do all of this, and don't put pressure on yourself to be able to do it instantly. It comes through practice, like I've said, and through different life experiences. But, like, you can do it all. Like, you don't have to just pick one thing to be, and you aren't locked into this box of whatever identity you're holding yourself to. I think for me, for so long, like, I was a competitive dancer growing up, and when I went to university and I was no longer dancing, I didn't know how to introduce myself anymore. Yeah. Like, I was no longer Allana, the competitive dancer. Like, I kind of lost my identity because I placed my whole identity in that, but I was really so much more. And then the same thing happened again once I left school, or once I left, like, my corporate job. I placed my whole identity in those singular things, when really I'm a human and I'm multifaceted, and I have so many parts that contribute to making who I am. And so do you, whoever's listening. There are so many parts that make up you. You are so much more than your career. And I think, honestly, I came to this realization through dating, because so many guys would I felt like on an interview, they would ask me so many questions about my career, especially now that I work for myself full time, because I know it's not a normal or traditional career path. Mm-hmm. And I kind of just got sick of it, like, being thrown into this box, like, oh, that's all who I am.
Yeah.
And you don't have to just be that, and you can change that narrative. You can change that story.
I love that. It's actually quite powerful, because I think it's the probably words and lessons that people need to hear, because we can be so scared of falling into brackets, and closing off a different bucket of who we want to be. And you're so right. You can be whatever you want to be, and that changes loads and loads and loads and loads and loads as you grow and get older, and you gather knowledge, and you learn the types of people you want to be, or the things you like about yourself, or the things you don't. So I think it's really, it's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you at right now? How are you feeling about you, about yourself? Where are you? What are your goals? Where are you going?
Honestly, I feel really good. I think 2023 was a year of a lot of ups and downs, a lot of uncertainty, a lack of confidence or certainty of, like, where I wanted to go, who I wanted to be, what was I doing with my life. And it was my first full year working for myself. And I really questioned a lot of things. And I think it's important to question a lot of things. And I know I'm still so young, like I'm only 24. But I feel like so much more sure of my purpose, whether that means I continue to be a creator or podcaster. I know my goal in life is to be able to connect and impact as many lives as I can positively, and to give the advice and the guidance that I wish I had, instead of having to like go through all these extreme hardships. Because I don't wish the feelings that I like let myself feel on anyone. Like, I was so hard on myself when I was younger, and I don't wish that on anyone. But I just like feel like if like 2023 I had really bad eyesight and no glasses, I finally have the glasses that allow me to see. Like,
that is great. That is
like, I have 20/20 vision and 20/24 or whatever, but me and my sayings, I just pull them out from wherever. But
that is so great, and it's so nice. I kind of feel the same at the minute. Like super clear, driven direction. I know where I am, I know where I'm going, and it's a really nice place to be. What has changed? How have you got to that place of fuzzy vision to 2020?
That's gonna be my new saying.
Did you literally just think of that then?
Yeah.
It was so good.
You know, you really just like start to think of like shit on the spot when you're on a podcast. But I don't know. I think I just had like the same realization again that like there's nothing wrong with just like being me and being so sure of me. And I think, I mean, I keep tying things back to dating, but I really do think I learned a lot about myself through the relationships that I had with men in 2023. If those shitty relationships could give me anything, it gave me that. Like, I know what I want. I know what I'm looking for. I know who I am. And I'm not afraid to admit that to myself or the people that walk into my life. And if they don't want any part in it, or if they're not aligned with it, then they're not meant to be there. I really have become a really firm believer that what's meant for you won't pass by you, and you won't lose what's meant for you. You can't say the wrong thing to the wrong person. Like, no matter if it's a friendship, a work relationship, a romantic relationship, you really cannot say the wrong thing to the right person. And I just like started to embody that in everything that I did. I was tired of feeling sorry for myself, feeling like playing into the victim mentality in certain areas of my life. I think you just have to get to this point. It's like your turning point. You have to hit a low, whatever it is, in whatever area of your life, in order to make a change. That's how I figured out life works. And unfortunately, you just have to ride the wave of getting to that low point. But you will know once you've hit it, because you get so frustrated and you almost use that frustration to fuel your motivation and your self-discipline to get yourself out of that low point and to turn yourself around and pivot you into the right direction, even if you don't know exactly what that direction is at that moment.
Yeah. I think that's also the most powerful thing. Like, people and anyone listening to this, you have to remember that when you're in a low, I once, was it a video, or it was either a video on YouTube or a video on TikTok, and the lady was basically saying, she owns a beauty brand based in Manchester, but she was basically saying that everyone thinks that life is like this, like for anyone watching on YouTube, I'm doing an arm, listening on the podcast, I'm doing a flat arm, and she was like, everyone thinks that life is just like super linear, but you have high moments and you have really low moments, and when you have high moments you have to get yourself back down, because the high does not last, it's not normal, and when you have low moments you have to get yourself back up. But everyone looks at it as good and bad, and it's not. Like, this is the content line essentially, and you have to learn how to get yourself from the ups and the downs back to the content without losing your shit, and that's like stability. And it's a really interesting thought process. She was basically saying that yeah, that's the stability, and that's kind of what everyone should aim for, because you grow from the high moments, but you also grow from the low moments. Going through a low moment is not bad, it's how you get yourself back up, where you learn to then deal with it the next time, because there's always going to be a next time. Like, you can't be happy all the time. It's not, do you know what I mean? It's just not possible.
Yeah. And like, the only time a low moment is bad is if you let yourself like sit in it. Like, if you let yourself just sit in your depression, like that is not good. Like, you need to learn how to figure out how to get yourself out of it, how to dig yourself out of the hole you put yourself in. And that is when you learn how to cope with these things. And a lot of the times when we make mistakes in lives, like, we're most likely not going to repeat that same mistake because we've learned from it. The only time you're going to keep repeating the same mistake, or you're going to have a continuous pattern in your life, is because you're not looking at what's happening in front of you and you're not making changes based on the outcomes. You can see patterns that occur in your friendships, in your relationships, like in outcomes at work. The reason why it keeps repeating is because the universe is giving you another opportunity to change the outcome. And until you realize why that pattern is repeating, it's just going to keep repeating itself. So be more self-aware and be aware of the patterns in your life and realize, do I need to change something? Is this something that I'm doing? Is this a self-sabotaging behavior? A lot of the times our relationships and our friendships are a mirror of our relationship with ourselves. So why is this person in our life? What do we need to work on internally, and what do we need to fix to move forward?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, there's a lot of conversation about being magnetic at the minute, and like being, attracting what you want and manifesting and all of that stuff. And I played with all of this idea and I figured it out, and I delved into it a little bit last year, and it's kind of not for me. But then I've also come to a realization that my version of magnetic is by making decisions that are based on what's best for you, learning from the mistakes that you've made, like only accepting people into your life that you feel are right, and like getting rid of the people that you are just like carrying dead weight or whatever, and actually making decisions. And that comes with hard conversations, but then you learn to, like, backbone's not the right word, but you learn like a different level of self-respect. And then I think when you get there, you firstly become more secure. But that's what being magnetic is. Magnetic is not like laying down and asking your vision board for, your visualization for a husband. Being magnetic is saying yes or no to what you believe is right and wrong, and following, like, having difficult conversations and following where you want to go and being ambitious with it in that way. That to me is what magnetic is. And I think once you get into that headspace, it's actually quite powerful.
Yeah, you have to lead what you want, like lead by taking action. You can't expect, I really do think the way you act in life, the energy you put out, the way you think of yourself and hold yourself, and the respect that you show yourself is what's going to be mirrored back to you. It's what you're going to attract to your life in terms of the situations that you get yourself into. It's what people are going to walk into your life. It's what work environments you're going to be in. Like, you really are capable of taking control of your circumstances and your situation. And it all starts from, what is your relationship with yourself? What is your standard with yourself? And setting those boundaries. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to set boundaries. It is not rude. You are allowed to be selfish. I think people point being selfish, or paint being selfish as a bad thing. And it can be in certain circumstances. Anything can be bad in a certain light, but you are allowed to be selfish and set those boundaries, and you're allowed to know your worth and stand behind it, even if someone is fighting you against it. Yeah. Because there will be people that fight you.
Always. I always think I had a really hard time last year in not falling out with friends, but I had people in my life that just wanted to be aggy. And I was like, why is this happening? Because I never have any confrontation. I've got really good friendship group. I have done for probably the past 5 to 6 years. And last year it was like one thing after another. And at the time I was like, what is going on? Am I being a dick? Like, am I attracting this? Am I doing something that's pissing people off? And I look back now and I was like, I've not had any conflict really in my life for 5 years. It's a lesson of growth to try and shed something or move further forward, or a self-development exercise. You just have to see things as lessons and as positives.
Yeah, I think it's all about how you frame things in life. And I always share, find the silver lining. Even if in the darkest of circumstances, you can find that silver lining And if it's the only thing that's giving you hope, if it's the only thing giving you light, hold on to it for dear life and allow that to propel you forward. Like you really, this is something like I always work on with my therapist, and I think she's literally like drilled it into my head, but you are not your circumstances. Like you have the power to rewrite your story no matter where you are in it, whether you're 15, whether you're 20, whether you're 30, 40, 50, 60, you can rewrite your story and you can reframe the way in which you see your life and see the things that happen in your life. Because you can paint yourself as a victim all you want, but you might not actually be a victim. Like you can play victim all you want, but you can just reframe that story and change it. You can change the narrative.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Yeah, this has been really interesting and a really, really interesting conversation. The last question that I kind of ask every guest on the podcast is their best advice and tips on how people can be more themselves.
A hard one. I feel like I've already spoken so much about it, but
no. You can repeat some of your favorite bits.
Okay. I think honestly, like my go-to when I'm like questioning, is this too much? Am I weird for liking these things? Like I let go of that. I let go of external expectations. I let go of how I think external people are going to perceive me. I think about why do I care so much about how I want to be perceived by others. And I tell myself, act confident and no one will question you. And also no one gives a shit that much. Like they really don't. We're all like, think about how consumed you are about yourself and how other people are perceiving you and apply that to every single other person. Like I always get asked, like, how do you get over gym fear? No one is looking at you. Everyone is so concerned with themselves, what they're doing, how they're looking, doing it, what they're wearing, etc. Like no one cares. Like, sure, someone may look over at you for 2 seconds, but why do you care? Like, if you are happy, if you are content with who you are, how you're dressing, what you're providing in life, what you're doing, it's your life. No one else is living your life. Live your life for you because you only get one.
I love that. I love that. And again, so powerful. But thank you. And thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. But also just for putting out what you're putting out, because this conversation has brought so much value. But honestly, I find it so humbling to listen to and hearing your conversations and your perspective on things, because I think we need a lot more of it and it's really raw and real. So yeah, I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you, Chloe. That really means a lot to me. And I'm not just saying that, like it really does.
Thank you.